Davis, and we're going to be talking about early career survival.
I'm supposed to stand next to him so this thing picks that up.
Is that good?
Well, yeah, kind of. That's real good, though. No, you did good.
Okay.
No, you did great. So we titled this deal "Early Career Survival," but the more I've kind of talked to other teacher friends and thought about it, and I think it's just survival in general. I don't think that anybody that's taught longer than a few years would say they just survived the early part. They're surviving every day, and I think most of us just really try to get through each year, and there's going to be something new and some kind of challenge or difficulty that none of us have experienced. And so this is about early career survival and some different things that maybe would happen over that first few years, but also some things that maybe some of us have dealt with that we're just going to try to talk through and work through and visit about. Which is why you're in a group. So what we're going to do is, in each of your tables, there's some little scenarios. There's these little pieces of paper. And so what I'm going to ask you guys to do is go through some of these scenarios, visit about them, maybe write down some notes, and then pick one person from each of your groups, and after about 10 or 15 minutes here, I'm going to have each of you come up and visit about maybe what you've came up with as some solutions to these scenarios. And then at the back half of this deal, I've got some career teachers that we're going to have a panel discussion and ask them some questions. And so hopefully it can kind of give us an idea of how to work through some different scenarios and situations, kind of geared around communication and to talk about some things that a lot of times we don't maybe just get to talk about. And hopefully this will also lend itself into some conversations maybe this evening if you're coming to dinner, maybe on into the school year as you kind of get settled into your jobs. I know there's different people that have moved positions or taken new positions. So I think it's just some things that we can look at and visit about. Lop's you're already into them. So as you kind of discuss those, write down some key things, and we'll talk about that a little bit. For me, I'm from North Rock Creek. I've been teaching about 13 years. I think it's when I'm fixing to start my 13th year. So I don't consider myself an expert by no means. Just been blessed enough to have a lot of different experiences. And so North Rock is a new high school, a new ag program around Shawnee. If you're not familiar with that area or where that's at. It's between Shawnee and Meeker off of Highway 18. So anyway, I guess one other thing I wanted to kind of visit about or say before you guys kind of really get started, how do you take advice? How do you glean things from other teachers? I think it's really keeping an open mind, and I think that's probably something sometimes we have a hard time with, is we get kind of set in our ways and we're not really willing to be flexible. And just to throw some things out there that I've learned, or I learned over the first few years of my teaching career, you got to have somebody to vent to. There's going to be times where there's just stuff that just eats at you and gets at you, and if you don't have somebody to talk to, that's going to be a challenge. So find somebody, that would be a piece of advice I have, find somebody that you can vent to, not necessarily a spouse or a significant other, but somebody that understands that you can just talk to them, call them anytime and get stuff off your chest. Also, another thing is find a role model or career teacher, or maybe it's your personal ag teacher that you had, or somebody you look up to that you can call and get advice from or talk to about with certain situations. If you don't have a teaching partner, or maybe somebody that you don't know who to call, look for that person in your county or in your area or across the state, somebody that you really trust that you can get good advice from. And then another thing I think I kind of learned that helped me a lot in my career is there's going to be stuff that happens, and I think a lot of times we get to where that really gets us down, and we think, well, I'm not doing the right thing, or I'm not good enough, or something like that, or my administrator gets mad at me, and that's going to be okay. Like, you're going to get through that, and when you learn to kind of have that confidence in yourself, and it's not the end of the world, I think that's something that really, really was good for me to learn, and really helped me along the way. At the very end of the day, guys, I think about stuff, and most, again, people in here are new teachers, or young teachers. I think about stuff a lot of times like how important our profession is and how important it is what we do. And there's a lot of teachers, you guys hear about this, a lot of teachers retiring, a lot of teachers that are moving on to other things that have been involved for a lot of years. Who's going to replace those people? Who replaces a Kenny Leatherwood? Who replaces a Jeff Evans? Who replaces a Randy Nation? Who replaces a Brian Campbell? It's us. I mean, at the end of the day, it's us. And so I think, lastly, to give the biggest piece of advice I would give you is if you'll always keep kids first and put them as your first priority and do what's right and always kind of keep that at the center of what you're doing, I think that's the most important thing. We're here to help kids be successful, influence young people in a positive way, and that will help you a lot over the course of your career, I think. At least it's helped me, and that's kind of what I stick to. So with that, if you would, look through some of those, write some things down, designate somebody to visit, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. Do I leave this on? Okay, walk around.
Yeah. This is every one of these I've had. My building is separate from me. You stopped for years. Went there. And kids did.
Yeah, I think we're just hang out and wait around. Hopefully those other guys will be here in a little bit. Oh, okay, good deal. $2.12, so $2.20.
That's what I've done.
And that's a big thing to try to avoid. And it works. Because it's easier on that family or that person if you're trying to. What do you guys do? You just keep rolling.
So is this young table having a good discussion?
I'm hoping so. I don't know. Tried to walk around so the camera would follow, but
She's certified? I am certified. There are.
I hope that made sense.
Working on it. Lord
Yeah.
willing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think it says, I've been asked to use my skill to drive a bus. I don't feel like this is my responsibility, or I just don't want to. That's why I work for this. Don't want to get a CDL. You've been asked to get it, but you don't want to.
That happened to me.
Or you don't feel like it.
I just got it.
And I was going to say, like,
The job said I'm a bad driver and it's terrifying to be in charge of kids' lives. And I'm not joking. I'm a bad driver. I've totaled 6 vehicles. Bad. But I just got it. And if they want somebody else to drive them, then somebody else better get their CDL.
I had a coach that kind of his daughters were in tag. When I first started, he's like,
The thing that gets me about the CDL deal is
keep putting it off because if you don't,
like the safety aspect of it in terms of having to get up early in the morning and get the bus, and you're driving to a contest, and you may drive 3 hours to Murray or Wilburton or wherever, and then you got to drive
All the way back.
all the way back.
Well, and the other part of it is, if you get your CDL,
Then you're driving
hey,
around.
we have a. I was going to say, yeah, you're driving
I've been
around.
there.
Exactly.
I've been there. But like I just Conwa a few years ago, there was a coach and some softball girls that were in a wreck, and like I think about coaches more than anything. If you teach all day and go coach a basketball game or a football game, and then you have to drive back at 10 o'clock at night.
I worry about that all the time with our ag teachers driving up north to get cattle.
Sure.
Or whatever livestock it is. And then they drive home over the weekend. And then that next day they go to school and they have whatever other activities. And it's just like,
When we go I don't want to
Yeah,
have
it's
to
Sleep is not overrated.
selfishly, I don't want to be in charge of an adult. I don't want to have to small talk with bus drivers. I don't want to hang out with them. The plus of having someone drive the bus is you can practice on the bus and like even
I hope it's helpful.
but also like not my responsibility to hang out with you. You know what I mean?
Barton Michelle, had you?
At least like this way I'm like, okay, load up.
She's got to be here because she was with John Derek and Walden.
You know? It sucks.
That's all right. I don't necessarily need them yet.
And the points stay on forever. I have 1 point left on my supply. You get a speeding ticket, the points stay.
This one is very controversial.
Is there any good ones?
Oh yeah, they're all good ones.
It's about like trips, staying in the room with students. Yeah, it's basically asking if that's okay or not. You know,
I did that at Geary when I was first started out, but then I could do it at Omega. They wouldn't say anything, but I just don't want to.
right? Well, I don't think anyone can afford to, even if you have a great relationships with families, and all it takes is one bad incident, and then it's your job.
I did it at Elgin too.
That's a big old practice at Elgin. We did that all the
I had to
time.
have kids.
I didn't think twice about it in high school.
Like I can remember being in high school, and that's what I
We did that.
shared one with my ag teacher. I mean, that's the way it
Well,
works.
they would send Elgin. They sent like Colby Howard, a boy, good kid. His parents didn't go to the show, so he stayed with me during Tulsa the whole time. It was either that or put him in a room by himself. If there was a game.
Yeah. So I don't know. Anything good?
Huh?
Any good ones?
Oh yeah, there's some pretty good ones. I've dealt with that one before.
Which one is that?
Livestock 30, 45.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's always fun.
What do you do? What do you do?
All I know to do is drive.
Did you guys get any good ones?
Yeah.
What's the favorite? Look at Reese, not me. Biggest supporters. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Too good. It's be all right.
He was in class until he got dismissed.
Did you guys get any good ones?
We did, yeah. We
Yeah.
got PDA and
That's always a fun
custodians
one.
in your shop and everything, right? But hey,
What do you do? You got them solved. It's good. It's good. There's so many different things. I mean, there's just
oh yeah.
so many. So,
I had 20 kids signed up.
did you guys get some good ones?
Some interesting ones, yeah.
So on this, I don't know, I made on my pen, and they said if he's not here, work on the studio.
I can just see you rolling a skid steer, and like blowing the thing out of the
We just like and it's really not expensive.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh.
If you guys would be kind of wrapping up and thinking about maybe which one of you wants to come up and share one of your scenarios and maybe some thoughts on that scenario, and we'll do that in a couple of minutes.
Just get it.
I have a lot of friends. Anybody else?
nothing when it never amount to anything. I'd rather
Because I was getting students that show up and they're like,
Okay, if you would, guys, go ahead and start sending your group leader, or your group individual, I guess, up to the front here, and we'll just line up. If you would, bring your scenario with you so you can read that. And then maybe some of your thoughts. If you would, just make a line right here. One person from each group. And you got to stand by me because I got this little thing on that's supposed to pick up the sound. So. Work.
Yeah, it does. Nobody wanted to come up here. So it's still excited.
5. Still ought to have about 2 or 3 more people.
Wyatt has to. Wyatt, come and share the story Cameron is afraid to share.
Okay, well, I appreciate you guys being willing to come up and visit about your topic. I will say this. I think a lot of these different topics are just a scratch of the surface, so to speak, to maybe some of the different things you could possibly experience and what others have experienced. And I would challenge you to maybe visit with other teachers about some of these things. Again, like I said, tonight, hopefully that fosters some conversation over dinner and throughout the year, or maybe as you get started into the school year through July and August. And most importantly, I think it's very important to say, guys, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to some of this stuff. And some of these things are very controversial. And some of them you kind of have to make a personal decision as to, is this a battle I want to fight? Is this a hill I want to die on? And it's going to be different with each community and each place you're at. So I think I go back to where is your moral and ethical compass? Where is your foundation rooted in to be able to try to answer some of these things? And maybe before you try to tackle it yourself, you get some advice from other teachers, maybe your administration, because again, there's not, I don't think, a set answer to each one because it's going to be different. But I think it's good to talk about some of these and kind of hear what some of the groups had to say. So, if you would share your first one, tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Megan Thormitsgard. I'm from Kingfisher. Our scenario is I've been asked to get my CDL to drive a bus, but don't feel like this is my responsibility or just don't want to. How do I work through this scenario? So at our table, we had discussed that our responsibilities and things look a lot different in each community. And in some scenarios, the reason we don't want to get our CDL is because you'll be used and abused and end up driving the bus route every afternoon. Personally, I ended up getting my CDL even though I'm a trash driver and don't trust myself to drive people's children around. Selfishly, I don't really want to hang out with a bus driver and be in charge of another adult. But I also will say that we talked about how easy it is to get your CDL taken away. I've only had mine 2 years. I only have 1 point left. And those stick with you forever. So if you do end up getting it, you can easily get your CDL taken away and then not be able to. Another plus is some schools will pay you extra duty to drive. So that's nice. You can get money to drive the bus if you're on the fence. And sometimes your school will pay for the class. But oftentimes you will get stuck driving bus route, which is really inconvenient when oftentimes ag teachers get roped into a lot of other random extra duty things. So that's what we talked about.
Very good. Thank you. Here, a round of applause. Okay, next.
I don't know how to follow that. I felt like that was really personal. Wow. That's awesome. Okay. So ours was, I have 2 FFA officers or members that are dating and continually set a bad example when it comes to PDA. I know their parents don't mind what they do, but I don't necessarily approve during FFA activities. How do I address this issue? So at our table, we discussed how, there are guidelines set in our schools when we're during school hours where PDA is not going to be allowed. And so if we let that continue into our trips and we follow those same guidelines, that's kind of our safeguard because we don't feel like it's a place. It's not the time and place for PDA, whether their parents approve of it or not. It's just not something we expect. And we also discussed some people have in place a no dating rule on their officer team. So if they were officers, that may be something that goes into play there. But we just felt like keeping it appropriate for everyone, setting clear guidelines and boundaries from the get-go so that it's not pointed at one group. It's the same for everybody.
Very good.
And I'm Julie Horton from Holdenville.
Very good. Thank you, Julie. Okay, next.
Hey, I'm Paige Aslin from Wewoka. Mine is, I know my school is not handling my state 412 money correctly, or I only have partial access to my funds. What can I do to make this better? So we just kind of discussed, you're just going to have to swallow your pride and go have a sit down one-to-one with your superintendent and just be open about it and disclose all your information and just try to get on the same page about it. But I don't really know any other way to get around that other than just having that one-to-one talk. Yeah, that's it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, next.
I'm Brianna Rowe. I'm going to be teaching at Wellston. My tables scenario is my school/community has a very active 4-H program, and I'm being told I'm not doing enough with 4-H kids. How can I define my role with 4-H? So we said basically that an ag teacher's role with 4-H varies depending on your community. So some communities want you to essentially be the 4-H leader. Everything's going to go through you to an extent, especially with livestock. Whereas other communities, like Edmond, where I'm from, it's definitely more hands-off with 4-H. They don't really have a whole lot to do with them, which is just fine. Every one of them is different. There's no right or wrong answer. But we kind of threw out there that we feel like we should be a resource to 4-H members. We can show them, an avenue to maybe eventually end up as one of our FFA members. But ultimately, that's not our job to be their 4-H leader. And so you really need to reach out to those people that don't think you're doing enough, see what you could be doing better, what their expectations are of you, and go from there.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, next.
Hi, I'm Taryn Sherman, and I'll be teaching at El Reno. So ours says, I have a parent or booster club officer that is used to taking charge and organizing events or activities. However, we don't agree, or I feel like they're trying to undermine my position. What strategies will help me work with this individual? We kind of didn't really know a good answer, but we said rely on community members who have been there longer, and maybe reach out to administration and your teaching partners, and also remain patient as a new teacher or someone at a new school, because it's going to take a little bit for them to see you as the authority.
Very good. Thank you.
My name is Garrett Saunders, and I teach at Sentinel. Our group's question was, or statement was, I have a student that should be getting the state FFA degree, but they do not want to do anything that relates to a scrapbook or portfolio, and their records in AET are a mess. What do I do now? Our group had a pretty firm consensus that if they're not going to put in any work, they're not going to get their state degree. Mr. Campbell came and spoke to us first-year teachers at one of our meetings in January, and he was talking about how much effort you put into helping a student with a speech. Does it equal the amount of effort you help a student with their show lamb? And I think that kind of goes in a lot of different areas, and for me personally, I think a state degree is the exact same, fits in the same boat. And so if I'm willing to spend a lot of hours, after school working a lot of my personal time on their show projects, I should also be willing to help them and keep them engaged in their state degree if it's something they really want.
Very good. Thank you. I'm going to piggyback on that one because that's actually one that I kind of relate to in a personal manner. I remember my first or second year teaching, I had a student that didn't care about getting a state FFA degree or anything, and I'm sure some of you guys have done this before. I pretty much did all of it for him because I knew that it was important to his parents and his grandparents. And I'll never forget, Grandma, Grandpa, and Dad, they were all, thank you so much, we appreciate that. That was a big deal, and it just kind of fostered some positive relationships with that family. But there's two sides of that. If the kid's not willing to work, I get it. So there's all these different things that you're going to experience, and again, a lot of them are controversial. There's no right or wrong answer, but I think they're good things to think about and talk about and visit about. And so maybe there's some things that you've experienced in your first couple of years or over your time teaching. Again, tonight at dinner, on the drive home tomorrow, or maybe even this evening, call somebody and say, hey, I had this happen to me this year. What do I do? Or what are your thoughts about this? I personally can't stress enough how important that is to reach out to your fellow ag teachers and your fellow resources that you have to get some advice on some of those things. And still yet, your administration, develop that relationship with a principal or superintendent to be able to visit with them about some of these different topics. So with that, I've got some tenured teachers. If you guys would come up, want to kind of have a panel discussion and ask them some some questions and kind of get some thoughts from those individuals. Some of you got Jamie. Are you here still? He had to step out. So John Derek Mitchell, you guys might know some of these individuals. You're welcome to sit here, stand, whatever you're comfortable with, guys. John Derek Mitchell has been teaching at Marlowe. He's transitioning to Central High. Bethany Reiterman is at Lone Grove. Jonathan Walden at Allen. Michelle Harper is at Medill. And Jamie Davies is at Velma Elma. If he'll get here in a minute. So I called these guys and asked them because I value a lot of their opinions and thoughts. And I mentioned earlier looking up to other ag teachers. I have a good friend that's he's a superintendent now, and I call him Superman all the time because when he was teaching, he could do anything, and he still can. But I say that to glean on other teachers. There's several people in this room that, even though they're not up here, that doesn't mean they're not a good resource. And I want you guys to know that because I think about Marty Jones, and he's one. And Cameron was in here a while ago, and Mr. Riley and Mr. Maddox and some of you guys that are in here that have been doing this for a while, and I'm probably missing some people. I do what? Yeah. So I apologize for that, but I just can't stress enough to seek these people out because, Mr. Mitchell, you're 20 years, is that right? 17. 17, okay, I'm sorry. Starting 18. I mean, when you start thinking about most teachers retire around 30 years, like, again, I go back to you younger teachers and some of us that haven't been teaching as long. We're the ones that need to fill those shoes, and how do you replace those people? Some of them are irreplaceable, but there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom to gain from those people. So that being said, my first question to the panel here, to each of you guys, and not everybody has to answer this if they don't necessarily want to, but what is one piece of advice or the first piece of advice you would give to any young teacher starting at a new job, or what are some of the first things that they should do or think about as they enter their new position?
I'll start, just because I'm on the I've only been teaching for 3 years. This will be my third year, so I'm not going to sit up here and act like I'm some expert. But I am someone who came in completely with a blank slate, being from out of state. I'm from Ohio. So I had to learn a lot very quickly, especially in Oklahoma FFA. You guys do it very differently from what I was used to. So one thing I will say is that first week, find somebody in your community that will introduce you to your big players in the community. Someone who supports your program, some of those business owners, some of those farmers, people who will be supporting your chapter throughout all the year. That way they have a face with your name. That opens that line of communication with that specific person. And you may meet some people in the community that could end up being your friends, or again, just bigger supporters in the community. So.
Me?
Yeah, ladies first.
Well, on the flip side from Miss Rotterman, I'm maybe the close to the longest tenured person in the room as I look around. I'm about to start my 22nd, I think, year teaching. And so my advice would be, I guess, a couple of things. First is that I think as a young teacher you have to be prepared to just ultimately do things that you don't necessarily want to do to earn your stripes. It's just the way it is. We've all had to do that, you know. And secondly, I think that I think we're going to talk about some of this, which is communication, but you cannot over communicate with people, stakeholders in your program. You just can't give them too much information, share things about your program, talk to parents enough. So don't be afraid to communicate with everybody that are stakeholders in your program.
My advice would be, find the sacred cow that each program has and make sure that you kept her fed. As a first-year teacher, took the job at Chattanooga. There wasn't a plaque on the wall where they'd repainted and instantly I was just going to not put any back up. If somebody said, no, that's a huge mistake, put them back up. And, I noticed they had 30-something years in a row that they'd won the county tractor driving contest. And I was like, well, apparently that's going to be something I really have to do. So, find the sacred cow and don't be the person that lets her die. Next, and we might get into this more, communicating with everybody's good, but know that there's every age gap possible in your community. I'm 40 years old and I still get in trouble because people will be like, you didn't tell me about it. And I was like, well, there was a flyer, there was a Facebook post, it was on the bank marquee. I'm sorry I didn't mail you a letter directly. I mean, it's easy to communicate through social media, but the people with the checkbooks, don't want to get a text. They'd like you to call, and they'd like a picture and a letter. And so know the age variance that you're going to have and find that sacred cow.
Kind of echoing what some of these guys have said up here already. Whenever you show up to community, you're going to have contact with maybe the former ag teacher, maybe the superintendent in that town, or your principal's going to tell you, oh, well, this family. Don't forget about, sometimes them other people have agendas and might give you bad advice on who's a bad family or whatever. Just go and meet everybody, make your own determination on how they are. Because I'm going to tell you right now, not everybody is easy to get along with. And then some people are really easy to get along with, and the people maybe you're listening to are the ones that are hard to get along with. So that's one thing I would say. Don't let somebody fall through the cracks in your program, which maybe they're just the family that don't have no money, and that's why everybody's kind of hard on them. And another thing, don't be afraid to try new things. If the tractor driving contest is something that's big in your community, get in there and be the best tractor driving teacher ever. And it's okay to say you don't know, but you're going to learn. Just learn. Do it. Every school that I've went to, I've had to learn and do different things at. So, and I'm at my 15th year now, and it just feels like I'm always evolving and trying to do different things. So as a first-year teacher, don't think, oh, well, I'm behind the ball because I don't know.
I guess we're all answering. My name's Jamie Davies. I teach at Velma. Been there 10 years. I guess kind of like what Jonathan said, go into it open-minded. Form your own opinion of people. Talk to your booster club president. Talk to your administration. Talk to the parents of the kids. I mean, kind of form your own opinion, because sometimes the first one that runs to you sometimes are the problem in the area, because it's almost like they want to get to you first to get in, because, just form your own opinion. Go into it open-minded. Treat everybody the same. Give them all a chance. That's probably the best way I would say go about it. Give everybody a chance. Stay open-minded. Form your own opinion, and follow your gut instinct if you kind of are a little concerned about somebody.
I think those are really, really good thoughts. Another question I would have for you guys is, can you talk a little bit about the importance of continued communication with your administration at school, the importance of advocating for your program, how do we stay on the forefront of relevancy at our program or at our schools, and maybe discuss a little bit. Sometimes when you're a new teacher, it's hard to develop that relationship or communicate with those administrators. Not everybody has to answer, but if a few of you guys have some thoughts on that, that'd be great.
Well, I'll share just a little bit. As I don't know about these guys, but as someone who's taught for several years, I've had a lot of administrators. And for a time, my husband Bart and I joked that, we had a new principal every year. We were at Medill there for a while, and so we felt like we were constantly having to educate a new administrator about what our program is like, because every chapter in the state of Oklahoma, your program's a little bit different. And so I would say initially that was a stressor of mine, and it was a frustrating part of my job, but I have embraced that a little bit more. And I think even though now we have a principal that's been there a while, I still make it a point to make sure he knows everything we're doing. Like I said, you can't communicate enough. And those principals don't want to be surprised by things for sure. And so it's also a good opportunity to just make sure that they know the odds of you having a former ag teacher as your principal are slim. And so the odds are they don't know everything you're doing all the time. And so you have to educate them. And so be prepared to maybe be a little bit of a, I wouldn't say a nuisance, but a gnat around their office, making sure they know what you're up to. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Do you invite like your superintendents and your new principals and stuff to your county shows or anything like that?
Yep.
Most of the time they get mad if you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my experience.
They'll really come if you feed them.
Yep.
I would say
So,
ours have like no idea, so.
Right.
Yep.
You know, kind of what Michelle said, you know, if you don't have a plan, make it look like you have one. I mean, administrators, everyone that I've ever met really likes their calendar. So, I mean, if you could go in there and say, here's my calendar, here's what we've got going, you know, maybe stop by once a month and say, hey, here's what's happening this month. I mean, if you don't have a plan, at least fake it until you make it, I guess, is some of my advice on it. You know, and all programs are different, and then everybody's preconceived notion is different. You know, I mean, even in your own school, the 9 years that I was at Marlowe, my contract still said VOAG on it, even though, you know, I mean, I'm the ag ed instructor, but that was still what it was going to be. And, you know, funny, everything fell under ag. They'd be like, well, you know, there's a molehill out on the school parking, or on the school grass. I think the ag department would take care of that. It's like, well, is the math department going to do the school's books? But, you know, so some of that as a newbie, just do it. And I mean, and eventually somebody else is going to be new and you won't have to do it again. So, but look like you have a plan, I guess. Calendars.
They do
I have
make
everything.
administrators happy.
I have everything wrote down multiple times.
To piggyback on what you're saying, John Derek, can you guys also visit a little bit about different communication platforms and maybe what you've found to work good, whether it's a Google Calendar or text or emails, or maybe how you work through that with parents and kids, Facebook? Thoughts on that?
So I have a Facebook page that we started at Central High, and I'm haven't officially started at my new school, and I'm following a guy that's taught for 42 of them at one school. So I have a Facebook page. I started a Twitter account, and these are really branching out for me. I have a group me. You know, I'm still going to print a whole lot. Probably the best thing I've done in my old teaching career is I went to the hardware store and got the big 4x8 sheet of whiteboard, put it on the wall, and there's a giant calendar. So 5 rows, 35 days, they know where something's at all the time. I'm nerdy enough that it's color-coded, but that way they can't say, like, I didn't know that was up. I was like, well, so.
I'll ask another one specifically to Bethany. If you guys don't know her, she's actually from Ohio, is that correct? So my question to her was going to be, how have you adapted to Oklahoma, and how do you, your paradigm differences maybe, how have they shifted, and how have you gotten settled in at Lone Grove, and how have you communicated with people and maybe been flexible or take that into account a little?
I'm still learning. Again, going in the third year, I feel like there's just consistently something that you have to catch on and learn. But I would say, and this is harped on a lot within our profession, but please do not be afraid to get a hold of people. You will never be a full expert in anything, and if you are, congratulations, you worked really hard to do that. But you can't know it all, and that's okay. So call somebody who's been there, done that. Like it was mentioned earlier, if you're struggling, poor Wyatt Shaw gets a call from me pretty often, and he calls me, and it's often just like, how are you doing? Like, are you okay? And nope, I'm struggling. Yep, okay, me too. Like, let's compare, contrast our struggles. Let's get some advice, maybe, you know, both of us being young teachers, we don't exactly know what we're doing, but we can kind of piggyback off of ideas. And so I just encourage you to find somebody, a mentor. Poor Miss Harper is another one that I call pretty often, of just like, how did you manage to do this and be successful at it? What is the key? Just find somebody who's been there and kind of piggyback with them.
Very good. Another question I would have, and you guys might have experience with this, might not. several people are in multiple teacher programs. How do you work through those teaching partner relationships, communication, maybe when there's different communication styles or different thoughts about the direction of the program? Can you guys give some thoughts on that?
Okay, well, I have a,
That's y'all two.
my husband and I teach together, if you don't know that already. And so our communication style is he figures I communicate enough for both of us. So that's the way it goes. So if he doesn't answer his phone, he knows the next call will be to me, and I'll answer their questions. So, but no, at school, we have a fairly new ag facility, and when we first started developing this ag facility, we wanted one central office, and the architect was just adamant that we have two offices because he wanted everything to be symmetrical, which I didn't like. But so only for about the last 3 years have Bart and I been in two separate offices instead of a central office. And I don't give architects much credit, but this one was a good one. So us having two separate offices is good for us to get away from each other. But we did have them cut holes for doors so that we could yell at each other across the hallway. So we do that. But no, in all seriousness, we have a unique situation where we hardly ever stop talking about FFA and school stuff. Good, bad, or indifferent. It's the way we operate. And so, I think if you're teaching with someone who's not your spouse that you have to love, even if, you just have to be really clear about all those communication things that we talked about, even with your administrator. You guys have to have a plan. You have to be on the same page. I think you have to communicate about your expectations, your goals, and all of those things have to be kind of going down the same path. Because if you're going in different directions, I think that could get ugly pretty quickly.
I guess I'm the only other one that's ever taught in a two-teacher. Whenever I was hired there at Colgate, I'd never met Newberry, and until we met at the superintendent's board meeting that night, and honestly, it was a great partnership, and we never had cross words with each other. It was literally a second marriage, though. I mean, I had my work wife, and then I had my wife at home. And with Newberry, we rode to different conferences together, everything. And definitely communication. If I was not teaching class, I might go over and sit in his class just hanging out, just listening to how he does things, and then he would do the same for me. And then at the end of the day, we'd sit there and probably compare notes like, hey, this kid's parents is probably a little nutty. We probably need to watch this, a little closer. We were wanting to go down the same path of being successful, so it always worked out really well. I could definitely see, though, like Ms. Harper said, if you and your person are not on the same page, it could be rough really quickly, I would think. And that's not your fault. If you're the older one or you're the younger one or whatever there, maybe that's a little bit of flex on both of you to get along and figure it out. But, that you would think schools would probably be a little better about maybe letting them help and pick their people that work with each other. I don't know. I guess I was just really fortunate and lucky, and it was a good experience.
I would add one more thing. When I first started teaching, I started at Moore High School, and so there were 4 of us. 2 of us were rookies, and 2 of my teaching partners had been teaching 20 plus years at that time, and they did not get along. And so my first year teaching, I experienced what a program where teaching partners did not communicate well at all and almost worked against each other could look like. I was there 1 year, and I wanted to be somewhere else because it was a challenge to be a new teacher and try to be in that and navigate, me trying to figure out what I was doing and try to pick sides, basically, I guess. But so I think if you're in a multi-teacher program, gosh, if they're not initiating the conversation, you need to, because you got to have good communication, I think.
I'll also say, probably some of y'all in here are already parents, but you can't let the kids work one against the other. You got to be on the same page. If this teacher does not want this to happen and you agree, you need to be on the same front. You can't be behind each other's backs, because that's probably what will make it the worst very quickly. I mean, I never experienced it, but I could see that.
That's great information. I want to get through one more question if we have time. Communication with kids happens on a daily basis. You guys have all been a part of that. And I think a lot of times kids will tell us things, or we'll have the opportunity to visit with them that they might not tell their parents. They might not tell a counselor. They might not tell another teacher. How do you stay professional? How do you work through that communication with students on a regular basis, if that makes sense? Does that kind of feel where I'm going with that? Any thoughts there?
I guess I'll go. So this year, especially with COVID, was hard, not only for us, but our kids especially. So I had a lot of different times where kids would come in and just be like, I need to talk to you. I'm not having a good day. This is happening, da-da-da-da-da. And that's fine, but there's also a line where you're not a therapist. And that's hard, especially for if you care about your kids. You want to be that person that they go to talk about their issues. But you also really aren't educated enough to help them in some of those situations if they're serious enough. So I ended up actually having like 2 or 3 kids get paid therapists this past year because I couldn't help them with their real life issues. And it's true, they will talk to you before they talk to their parents, or they won't talk to their parents at all. So depending on your relationship with their parents, it may not be your business to tell the parents, but if it's a serious situation enough, you need to have that open line of communication of like, hey, your kid's struggling, and I don't know if you see it, but I see it on a daily basis. So let's maybe take some steps to get them some help that they need because they are struggling.
Yeah, and I would say you have to use your high school counselors and/or administration if there are situations that definitely need to be reported to someone other than you. And I will say personally that I've had a couple of students that were in those situations where it was something that definitely needed to be reported above my pay grade. And you have to be smart enough to know and in tune enough to know what's just a kiddo having a bad day and needing to blow off some steam, and when someone else needs to be involved, because you don't need that pressure either, honestly. We have enough to do. I mean, so there are some times you just have to make the call and say, I think we need to talk to someone else.
Very good. We're about out of time, and it goes quick, and there's a lot of different things to still yet visit about. I'd encourage you to, again, ask people in the room, ask these guys up here. If you're not familiar with the AET app, you can get on that and find teachers' phone numbers across the state. So I would utilize that as a resource. If you're like, I really want to talk to so-and-so, but I don't have their phone number, you can get on that and find their phone number and call them up. So that's a good resource if you didn't know about that. A great place to start to try to get a hold of some people about some different things. Whether it's something personal or something like, I got a problem with the sheep, I need to call so-and-so, or I got a problem with this judging team, I don't know how to do this. So that's the last thing I want to leave you with. If you guys would give these guys a round of applause. Thank you guys for being here. With that, I'll turn it back over to.
All right, just make sure to fill out your Scantron deal with the QR code deal. Survey.
Thank you. Hope that was a start. Something to talk about. So,
Thank you for asking.
Well, thank you for offering.
Did go quick.
Yeah.